Hey, good morning. It's been a very busy few weeks for us. Couple of weeks, excuse me. Everybody's kind of running on empty, it feels like. I woke up this morning after hearing news about our activity in Iran with a heavy heart, and wasn't sure what to do last night with all that news, but I prayed. My wife and I prayed together, and she, as a good partner does for their partner, picked me up, um, prayed a really beautiful and strong prayer, and um, set me back on my course. And I'm thankful for her. I'm thankful for the opportunity to serve, and I'm thankful for the gentle reminders all around us of all the good that we get to take part in, even if the bad and the difficult are louder than the good. This morning I was reading my Bible, and I came across a story between Christ and the disciples. Now, kind of before you kind of get into the story itself, it's very important that you understand the context of what happens in the ancient world on a social level. The process for children's education in ancient Israel, it was pretty extensive. There was essentially like a 3-step process that they had to go through. All the kids started at the first step, and their first job in this first step was to memorize the first 5 books of the Bible, which we call the Torah. So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And they would do this by about age 9 or 10. I mean, having all of those words and all of those stories seared into their memory by that age gave them a good compass for life, I believe. But most kids left their educations from there and went and did their own thing. But the ones that stood out would go to the next level, and they would essentially memorize. By the time Christ came rolling around, they would memorize the entire Old Testament. And then if they did well there, they would move on to study under their rabbis. And even from then, there was another level, if I recall correctly, of like only the best of the best being chosen to continue the work of rabbis. In the military, we have a lot of different training schools and learning opportunities that kind of do this phase-by-phase process. Ranger School, I believe, is like that. Our SF community is set up like that. So this process of screening is not unfamiliar to us here in the military. The ironic part about Christ's ministry, whenever he called these disciples, I mean, they were just regular journeymen, right? Like, they were fishermen. They did, day labor. These weren't the guys that made it to the 3rd or 4th level of that educational process. Fast forward to this story about Jesus and the disciples, and they went to this area called Bethsaida. Jesus did his thing, preaching to folks and talking to them, like trying to change their worldview. We talked last time about the word repentance being a change of your mind. Then they, while he's finishing up, the guys are out in the boat, and a storm comes, and it says the disciples panicked. We're trying to fight the wind. We're not very successful at that. And Christ walked out to them on the water. At some point, Peter was told by Christ to come to him, and he tries to do that. He gets out on the water, and he starts to take a few steps, and all of a sudden he begins to sink. A lot of times when we reread this response from Christ, where Christ said something to Peter about having little faith, we understandably assume that Christ is talking about having little faith in his power, in Christ's power. But if you kind of understand where these disciples are coming from, their role, their future role in spreading the gospel and carrying forward this torch for Christ, it's hard not to think that Christ was just telling him that he didn't believe in himself, having little faith in his calling, having little faith in his abilities to do things. I mean, even in chapters before this, the gospel writers talked about how, like, shortly after having jumped on board with Christ, they were going around healing people. And somewhere along the way, Peter had a shift in his ability to trust himself. A lack of trust builds anxiety. It causes folks to experience depression. It can really be hell on earth for people whenever they're that unsure of themselves. But Christ believes in you too. See, this is what it means to be in a covenant where both parties have an obligation to each other. And that can be layered, right? At the very least, we're called to acknowledge Christ's design for us, commit to it, and in return, we experience a more fruitful, meaningful life. But that's got to start somewhere else before it gets there. It has to start with an acceptance of our limitations, and an acceptance of the change that Christ can bring in us. And before the beginning of time, even an acknowledgement from Christ that he won't abandon us. He'll be there. So when we run into self-doubt, let's remind ourselves that Christ believes in us, that Christ believes in us for a reason, and then not only should we believe in ourselves, but we should remind others to believe in themselves, and that a part of this design that God has for us is to be able to sit in a place of peace that only comes through trust. It isn't self-righteousness that we're called to believe in, but it is a trust in our design that we should focus on. Y'all take care of yourselves. We will be having some field services throughout the day today. I'm looking forward to catching up with those of you that are able to attend them, and pass on the good word.